It's called hentai. And it's art.
If you told me one of the best Metroidvanias to come out of 2024 was going to star a pig in a hazmat suit running around the insides of a dog full of pee and poop jokes, I'd have said, that sounds about right. I had very low expectations for Biogun, a microscopic adventure. I thought it was just going to be this goofy, cartoony romp designed specifically to get a chuckle out of children and immature dudes like me and my audience. Boy, was I wrong. Not only is Biogun a legit MV, but it has a lot of heart. I wrote that and didn't even realize it was a pun until recording. I should probably just delete. So, what is Biogun? This world's plagued by a petdemic. The duper virus threatens the extermination of dog kind, but one man isn't having any of that. Enter Dr. X, a biochemical engineer with a secret weapon. Beck, a smart vaccine with one purpose: save Doc X dog Penny at any cost. With objective set, the good doctor injects Beck into his ailing pooch, and our microscopic adventure begins. And boy, is it an adventure. There's nothing microscopic about its length. It took me about 15 hours to complete it 90-something%, which is a nice, healthy length for Metroidvania in my opinion. But was it time well spent? Let's talk about it.
Combat.
I'm gonna get my prejudice out of the way early. I suck, and therefore hate twin-stick shooters. And wouldn't you know it, that's exactly what Biogun is. Don't get me wrong, I try to like twin-stick shooters. I'm just bad at them. People tell me I'd be better if I used a mouse and a keyboard, but I'm a controller guy and guarantee that just make things worse. That being said, despite my distaste, I enjoyed and actually thrived at using Biogun's twin-stick shooter combat. How? With a gun mod called Seeker. I'll get into mods here in a sec, but let me tell you, if you suck at twin-stick shooters like I do, this mod's a game changer. As a twin-stick shooter, Beck has 360-degree control over where he aims. Point at something with the right stick, then pull the trigger to shoot. Simple enough. His gun's kinda terrible at first. It's one of those guns with bullets that disintegrate after traveling only a few feet, or after about a meter for my non-American viewers. This is where gun mods come into play. Beck's gun has 6 stats: damage, range, accuracy, etc. And these stats are affected by the gun mod you attach. Some mods have really cool effects and behaviors beyond just altering these stats, like the Snot Bomber that shoots boogers that explode when they touch. Did I fail to mention this game is classy? There's 12 mods in all, but the mod I suggest for anyone who's twin-stick shooter challenged like myself is the Seeker mod I brought up earlier. It's basically this game's easy mode because its bullets have a slight homing effect and its range is way better than most guns. It is relatively weak, but when you miss half your shots like I do when using regular guns, going from strong bullets I miss with to weak bullets I actually hit with is an incredible jump and damage increase. And you can get this mod pretty early in your adventure, so if you're finding that you too suck at twin-stick shooters, then I'd suggest using the Seeker mod until you get good. Even though there's the ability to rebind your controls, the game comes with 2 default options. One option complements platforming and the other complements combat. The main difference between the platforming and combat options is basically where the jump button is placed, either on the bottom face button or the left bumper, respectively. I went through the entire game with the platforming option because I didn't feel like pausing the game to switch controls every time I got to a boss, and everything worked out fine for me. But I can definitely see how the combat option would be better for boss encounters because sometimes simultaneously aiming, shooting, and jumping is tough to do on the platformer option. But again, you can switch options anytime you want, so choose what's best for you. Here's a weird suggestion. So if Dapper Dog Digital ends up checking this vid out, hey, thanks for creating such a great game. But also, have y'all ever played Alien Soldier on the Mega Drive? In that game, you can switch up playstyles on the fly by holding down and pressing a button. I think something like that would be a cool idea to implement in Biogun, being able to switch between platformer and combat controller options on the fly so I wouldn't have to pause the game. I'm no developer, so I can't even pretend I know the logistics around something like that, but I think being able to switch to combat controls in real time when I step into a boss room would be pretty cool. Just a suggestion. Hey, speaking of boss rooms, that's where the bosses are. Bosses in this game are pretty awesome. They're big, their designs are cool with all their mandibles and tendrils and just overall viral nastiness, and they're a ton of fun to fight. It's probably my lack of skill with twin-stick shooters, but I found most of the game's bosses to be challenging. There were a few I was able to take out on my first encounter, but most required 3 to 4 tries before I put them down. That's a solid KD ratio for boss fights, I think. A ratio like that means bosses are tough enough to be engaging, but not too tough to be frustrating. Seriously, I love the bosses in this game. And there's a ton of them too, with the majority of them being optional. There's just something inherently awesome about defeating optional bosses to get sweet loot. It's some seriously good stuff I like to see in my Metroidvanias. Now, successfully defeating these bosses requires you to utilize all the tools at your disposal. And I'm not just talking about gun mods. See that syringe in the top left corner? That's your atomic energy. You use that to heal and use special guns, and it recharges a little with every attack. It's a simple system we're all familiar with, and it works very well in Biogun. This orange meter is for your overdrive energy. You get overdrive energy by killing things with your special guns. Overdrive's a state you can toggle that increases your fire rate, which in turn increases your DPS. It's cool, and I like the synergy created between the two systems. Gaining overdrive energy by killing things with atomic energy is kind of a risk-reward system. I could use atomic energy to heal, or I could use atomic energy to attack to gain overdrive energy so I can do more damage. It all depends on whether you want to play offensively or defensively. Alright, I have one criticism, but it's less about combat and more about what happens when you suck at combat. Punitive deaths. This is just something that has to stop in Metroidvanias. I'm begging you. In Biogun, death takes away your atomic energy until you fill it back up by attacking enemies enough. It's truly not that bad, it's not like you lose all your currency or anything, but it's still inconvenient. There were times when I died and had to make up significant progress because the save station I respawned at was so far away from where I died. Can't wasting my time be punishment enough? Do you really have to take away my healing and special guns too? And that'll do it for combat. It's a twin stick shooter. If you're down with that, you're gonna like what Biogun has to offer. The gun mods can vary your playstyle for variety, and the atomic and overdrive systems add much to the combat's engagement. And the bosses here are no slouch. Expect to be challenged, but not to the point of frustration.
Abilities. Platforming.
Beck has a nice mixture of tried and true and unique abilities. As for the tried and true, he starts with a dash he can use on the ground or in the air, and then he eventually gets a double jump and a ground pound that's used in not a way that probably comes to mind when I say ground pound. As for the rest of the abilities, I kinda don't want to spoil them. I will say some have utility and combat features, while others completely surprised me with their uniqueness. It's all really good stuff. My one critique about some of the abilities is that you get them way too late for them to be useful. I'll spoil one because it's not that unique. Basically, Beck gets a move that turns his dash into an attack, but I got it right before I fought the boss of the game and never used it once. Then there's this other really cool passive ability you unlock after a game-spanning side quest, but you don't really even need it at that point because you're most likely on your way to completing the game. As far as platforming goes, Biogun does alright. The moment-to-moment platforming is pretty good with some challenging bits, and there are tons of optional sequences that'll make you sweat. It's a pretty good balance overall. The most unique mechanic Biogun brings to the table is the use of enzymes, these little floating blobby things. This mechanic was a gamble, and thankfully, the devs pulled it off. I'll explain, but I will have to spoil one of the game's more unique abilities. I'll throw up a spoiler tag before spoiling anything. Anyway, enzymes come in different colors, and these different colors denote different properties. Yellow enzymes cause explosions that remove barriers, pink enzymes allow you to temporarily traverse through harmful pink liquid, and green enzymes give you temporary atomic energy regen. There are other types, but I'll leave them for you to discover. Where the gamble lies is how transient these enzymes are. You have a limited time to use them, and this time limit adds pressure when you're trying to get through a tricky platforming area before your yellow enzyme goes off. This is great. I love sequences that add pressure like this, but this becomes an issue when you come across locations that need certain enzymes, but those enzymes are nowhere in sight. Okay, minor spoiler time, go here to skip. The solution to this issue is the capture capsule ability that allows Beck to hold on to enzymes so he can use them later. It's ingenious. However, it kinda sucks when you come across, let's say, a pool of harmful pink liquid and there's no pink enzyme in sight, and the enzyme you're holding is yellow. Now I have to hunt down a pink enzyme and waste my yellow enzyme. And sometimes the enzyme you need in a situation is way out of the way. This is a rare occurrence, but it happens, I think, a couple times. Is this a huge issue? Not really, but it could have been. Thankfully, the devs knew what they were doing and used this scenario sparingly. And that's it for this section. Biogun has a good mix of old and new abilities, its platforming's good to great and always fun, and the enzyme mechanic is Very neat.
Progression.
Not a lot of RPG elements in Biogun. Your gun has its 6 stats that can be altered based on the gun mod you attach, and you can increase your health and atomic energy by finding ionized atoms during your journey. For 3 ionized atoms you find, you can increase either your health or energy, but not both at the same time. The only reason to kill enemies is to collect globs, this game's currency. You can also collect globs by shooting deposits found in the environment. Globs can be spent at stores and kiosks spread throughout the map to buy tablets, cosmetics, and chips. Tablets are consumables that do all kinds of things, like healing your HP or energy. Cosmetics are just different hats and stuff you can wear. They're pointless, yet amazing. And chips are your Hollow Knight charms. You can only equip 1 chip at a time, so make it count. I liked the chip that gave me a drone buddy who helped me shoot things. Other effects chips can do are give you a defensive barrier, double the currency you collect, or revive you once upon death. Chips are fine, but considering they're your main form of player expression, I wish I could have equipped more than just 1. There's a lot of side quests, many of which are game spanning, which I love. There are dogs to rescue, nerves to find, biomatter to scan, lots to do in between all the shooting. The scanner Beck eventually gets is pretty cool. It starts out kind of pointless, but actually gains useful abilities as you reach scanning milestones. I honestly didn't expect that I'd love scanning crap in a video game, but Biogun made it rewarding and fun. And that's it for progression. There's no leveling or skill trees. Improving Beck requires exploration and completion of side quests. And might I say, if you go into the mission log, you'll find all kinds of question marks indicating there is a bunch more side quests than there currently are in the game. I don't know what that's about, probably DLC stuff, but that's a lot of question marks, and I thought I missed a bunch of stuff. Maybe I did, y'all tell me if I missed anything, but I think it's probably DLC stuff, maybe. And as far as player expression goes, it's pretty sparse. You're really left with choosing which gun mod and which chip you want to use. And, most importantly, which hat.
Exploration.
Biogun's exploration does something very interesting, but I'll get into that in a moment. First, you probably want to know if exploration is good, and the simple answer is yes. Yes, it is. Biogun's exploration is very rewarding with lots to find. Breakable walls, collectibles, treasure chests full of loot and globs. And let's not forget about the optional bosses, challenging hidden platform sequences, and the off-the-beaten-path side quests. There's lots to do and find throughout your journey. But what makes Biogun's exploration interesting is how its world is delivered to the player, almost as if it's divided into different acts. The first part of the game, or first act, is very open with multiple smaller biomes connecting and circling back onto each other in fascinating ways, giving players a good sense of the world. The second part of the game begins like any second act of a story would. Something big happens to narrow the adventure's focus, and new paths open up. What makes the second part so different is the scale of these new paths or biomes. I'd say the first 6 to 7 hours of Biogun has Beck traversing through several biomes, each more diverse than the last. But the second half, the other 6 to 7 hours of the game, that's relegated to just 2 gigantic biomes. This essentially makes the latter half of the game feel very homogeneous, especially when comparing it to the first half. I'm not saying these 2 halves feel like 2 different games. On the contrary, I found the divide to be a very effective means of storytelling, but I'll dive into that a little more in the next section. For now, just know the biomes are diverse in the beginning and then narrow in scope and variety halfway through. The last thing I want to mention before wrapping up this section is fast travel and synapses. First off, the fast travel is creative. You find injection zones, and then Doc X transports you between points via a syringe. Now, what makes this interesting is that you can actually fast travel to injection zones you haven't visited yet. But to do this, you have to place synapses into a biome's nervous system. Alright, let me back up. Each biome has a nervous system where up to 3 synapses can be placed. Synapses can be bought at stores or found in the wild. Each time you place a synapse into a nervous system, the in-game map upgrades. 1 synapse reveals the biome's map, 2 reveals the biome's collectibles, and 3 reveals all the biome's injection zones. And if you reveal injection zones in this way, you're able to fast travel to them. There were times I'd dive deeply into uncharted territory just because I could. Now, you might think this is broken and can lead to a bunch of sequence breaking. Well, you'd be wrong. The sequence breaking award in Biogun goes to the Seeker gun mod that shoots through gates if you aim it at just the right angle. As for going into injection zones you haven't physically visited yet, don't worry. The devs know. They'll block your progress somehow. And that does it for exploration. It's very rewarding, has creative fast travel and map reveal systems, and the way exploration plays out like a 3-act structure works very well. And now seems as good a time as any to talk about the narrative and that 3-act structure.
Atmosphere. Narrative.
Okay, before I get into the narrative, I just wanted to quickly point out that this game's presentation is outstanding. Vivid colors, great animation, wonderful music. I'm not the smartest when it comes to music, so I'm not certain what to call the musical technique they use. I think it might be called a rondo. Basically, there's one central piece of music, and they reuse this music a lot throughout the game by switching up its style and tempo and whatnot. Take a listen. I don't know, I just love it when games do this, and it especially helps that the track they reuse and remix is a banger. Obviously, not every track reuses this tune, and a lot of the other tracks are pretty amazing as well. Alright, let's talk about that narrative. So, Biogun's story took me completely by surprise. It's actually really good. I thought it was going to be some throwaway plot that exists just enough to push the player along, but no. The devs went all in on crafting an interesting story, and they nailed it. What, at a glance, looks like a cartoony romp through the innards of a dog actually gives way to a plot containing shonen anime level styles of inspirational moments. There were times I actually fist pumped as Beck and Doc X worked together to take down the duper virus and its spawn. I am not kidding. I could place inspirational anime music at these pivotal moments and it'd work. It was awesome. But I have to say my favorite part of Biogun is how they took real-world physiology and biological processes and translated them into different governmental organizations working together to help Penny. The WBC, or white blood cells, were hard-asses who didn't trust Beck and blocked him at every turn because he was an outsider, which is exactly how white blood cells act toward foreign materials. And the game's full of this stuff. An agent in charge of Penny's bladder, red blood cells traveling all over the place to deliver oxygen, and thus they have special clearance, a DJ in charge of Penny's heart's rhythm. Seriously, the creativity on display is astounding and makes for a fun and interesting little world. Not only are the characters and locales creative, but the game's own exploration complements the story's delivery. This is the 3-act structure I was talking about in the last section. In Act 1, world and characters are established. Lots of biomes, lots of introductions, lots of exploration within lots of biomes. In Act 2, something big happens, new conflict is introduced to drive tension, and as Beck's objective becomes more focused, so too does exploration. Exploration throughout a bunch of smaller biomes gives way to exploration between 2 massive biomes. It's an odd yet welcome and effective shift that tells players things have changed. And once you complete Act 2's massive biomes, it's on to Act 3. The climax. And Biogun nails the climax by making the final battle its only focus. You can choose to stick around and complete any side quests or collect any collectibles you may have missed, but after Act 2, it's time to end things. It's just so excellently paced. Now, I'm not saying every Metroidvania needs to have this kind of 3-act structure in order to be great. What I am saying is that Biogun used the 3-act structure and killed it. It all came together to make a great story. And there are lots of other things Biogun does to make its story compelling. The grit Beck shows when facing the duper virus's spawns, the assists from Dr. X that I literally fist bumped for. I am 100% serious. It was awesome. All the little stories told throughout each biome, like how the liver is losing soldiers and how that's affecting the living. I'm not kidding when I say this game has top-notch storytelling. Yeah, it can be a little goofy and has some pee and poop jokes, but I never found its humor to detract from the overarching plot. There's really not much else I could say about the narrative or its atmosphere. It's funny, it's a little silly, inspiring, tense, and has a satisfying ending, of which there's only one. I'm surprisingly not too concerned with there only being one ending. I felt the story wrapped up nicely as is. Okay, spoiler time. Go to this timestamp to fast travel to my final thoughts and score.
Spoilers.
Welcome to the spoiler section, where every little thing's brought up and the format don't matter. Not a lot to go over here, I just wanted to share some oddities. Devs often watch my stuff, so I wanted to showcase a few bugs they might want to look at. Now, in the devs' defense, I played Biogun on my Steam Deck, and they threw up a warning at the beginning about how the game wasn't optimized for the deck. So take these oddities with a grain of salt. Okay, first off, this boss glitched out on me. It was fine the first couple of times I fought it, but the third time, it just wasn't responsive. I noticed it only had 2 tendrils instead of the 4 it usually had. Well, either way, a win's a win, baby! Also, what's up with this infinity percentage? Is it a bug or a joke that went over my head? Same with the scannables discovered number on the breakdown screen. That's a heck of a percentage. Okay, moving beyond oddities, something else that bugged me was the Nomad character. He's mysterious and evidently powerful, but I couldn't do anything with him. He says we might see each other again, but he never leaves that spot. I went to another area with a similar cocoon, but nothing. There's actually a lot of mysterious or intriguing things that happen in this game that I either couldn't figure out or currently lead to nowhere because I'm assuming these things are being set up for possible DLC. The Nomad and what he is and what he's doing, the little yellow parasite creatures and their true motive, the area at the end of the game that's blocked off by guards. It's kind of frustrating that these things captured my imagination and pushed me to move forward, but they never lead to anything. Very disappointing. Here's hoping for DLC.
Final thoughts and score.
Biogun, a microscopic adventure, surprised me in the best possible ways. While it might look like a goofy, cartoonish game at first glance, it's actually a well-crafted Metroidvania with a lot of heart. Pun intended this time. The combat, though challenging as a twin-stick shooter, becomes accessible with the right mods, and the game's exploration is both rewarding and smartly designed. What really stands out, though, is its clever and unexpectedly well-delivered narrative that combines real-world biology with creative world-building, leading to a truly engaging experience. I award Biogun, a microscopic adventure, an 8.5 out of 10.
Tier placement.
There's not a lot that Biogun doesn't excel at in the MV space. Challenging combat, great narrative, and excellent exploration, just to name a few. Its character progression was only pretty good, leaving a lot to be desired when it comes to player expression. It definitely falls more into the Metroid-like end of the Metroidvania spectrum, and as a Metroid-like, it's pretty dang good. I'd say our little pig boy's adventure easily lands him in the A tier. If you're a Metroidvania fan, you've probably already guessed that you shouldn't be sleeping on Biogun. This is one adventure that you should really give a shot.